Hilchas Gzeilah V'Aveidah Perek Shmini. Now in Perek Zayin we learned the din that if a person owes someone money, regardless of why he owes him the money, and that person muns by him the money, and he denies owing him the money, and he swears falsely to him. Now swearing doesn't mean swearing in Bezdin, it means he just swore falsely that he doesn't owe him the money. So now if he admits that he owes him the money, he has to pay this person back the keren and also the chemish. And the din is that he has to bring a carbon, and that carbon is a carbon osham, and it's called the Asham Gzelis. There's the osham, which because he was nishba l'sheker, b'negea gezel, b'negea this inyan that he owed money, and he was nishba that he doesn't owe the money. Now, if a person owes someone money and that person dies, so the din is you have to pay his yorshim. Al derech zev, the scenario happened where you swore falsely to someone, and lepel now you're being meida, so be'emes you would owe this person keren v'chemish, and lepel that person is no longer alive, so you have to give this keren v'chemish to the yorshim. To the yorshim you have to give the keren v'chemish. Perek Shmini, hagoizel is chaveri umesa nigzel b'chlal. Person steals from someone, and the nigzel dies, so the din is yachzer gzeilah yorshim. So you have to return the gzeilah to the yorshim. That's if it's, let's say it's be'en. Now the avdei nishtanis, if the gzeilah is no longer be'en, it was avdei nishtanis, is neislam demeh. So you have to pay the yorshim the demei gzeilah of what you stole from their moirish. Now v'im nishbar leiv achar kach mes. If the situation was that you owed someone money, you were geizelis chaveri, and then lepel that person mon from you, and you were nishbalei and v'achar kach mes, or regardless of how you owed him the money, someone mon by you money, and you were nishba and lebisheker, and then that person was mes. So the din is noisen liyarshim keren b'chemish. Then he pays the yarshim the keren b'chemish. And the pashtus, the Rambam doesn't say it. The pashtus advarim is that after that he has to bring a carbon noshim. That's l'chor the pashtus advarim. Halacha beis. Hagoizel is aviv v'nishbalei. Person steals from his own father. He steals from his own father and he swears to his father. Umesa e'av, and now the father dies. So be'etzim he owed the father money, and really if the father would still be alive, he'd pay the keren v'chemish to the father. But now the father is no longer alive. Now the ma'aseh is he is one of the yorshim. So the question is he owes the keren v'chemish to the father, and now he owes it to the yorshim, but he's one of the yorshim. So if the original gzeilah is no longer kayemes, so basically he would have to pay his father the demei of the gzeilah plus the chemish, and now he has to pay the yarshim, the demei of the gzeilah plus the chemish. And since he's one of the yarshim, so he pays everyone besides himself, and besides his portion. Obviously, he's not going to take from one pocket and put it into the other pocket. Is ein gzeilah kayemes, ein shtanis, so you don't have to give back the guf hadavar. Is oisa cheshbon echav ala keren ala chemish. He makes a cheshbon. How much was the keren, the chemish that he would have to give to his father, and what portion of the Yerusha is he entitled to, and the rest of it he has to give over to his brothers. He has, let's say, one brother, so he gives half of what if he would have normally have to give to his father, he gives to his brother. That's talking about him ein gzeilah kayemes. Now the im gzeilah kayemes, so there's the gzeilah kayemes, and he was geizel. The question is, there's two options. Let's say he has one brother. So there's two options. Either he should keep the gzeilah and pay the brother half of the worth of the gzeilah and half of the chaimish, or he should give the brother the gzeilah and the brother would give him back half of the worth. So then is im gzeilah kayemes is chayev lohitzi gzeilah atzm tachas yodi. He shouldn't be remaining with the dover hagozel that he actually gazel. Now this din it brings from Rambara from Meiri that it's not a din gomer. No, it's not meikr din. It's a din that Chazal instituted that he shouldn't be keeping the gzeilah. The gzeilah that he himself gazel shouldn't remain biyodi. The gzeilah kayemes is chayev lahitzi gzeilah b'tachas yodi. He should get rid of the gzeilah. He should give it to the other yedish. Lefichach neisen is gzeilah v'sachemish le'echav. He gives the gzeilah and the chemish of what they're entitled to le'echav. And then he makes a cheshbon. Obviously, b'negeh the keren, b'negeh the chemish. He originally only gave them what they're entitled to, and b'negeh the keren. So he was the entitled to part of the keren. So he makes with them a cheshbon, and they give him back whatever he's entitled to as part of the keren. That's talking about if there are other brothers. There are other brothers, so he gives the brother he gives the brother their portion in the keren and the chemish. Now, im ein leyachem, there are no other brothers. Shenim tzazeh gazn levadi hu hayerish. He ends up he's the yerish. So really, he has nothing to give away. There doesn't really have to give. He has to give his father. He would really have to give his father the keren v'chemish. But the mice is he's became of his father, so he can't get. So see, there's no one to give to because he's the yerish. So on the other end, but Lepel, Chazal didn't want that he should remain with the Gzeilah, that the Dover HaGozel should remain biyodei. So again, if the Gzeilah is be'en, is Moitzi HaGzeilah mitachas yodei lebanav. He should get rid of the Gzeilah. So even though he doesn't really, there's no one he can pay it up to, but he should get rid of the Gzeilah. The Gzeilah shouldn't be by him. He has children, he should give it to his children. If he doesn't have any children, so Neisn lebalchev, it says over here, oy bal v'aseh, but it should really say b'al v'aseh. Elizdaka, so he gives it away, b'al v'aseh elizdaka. Hail v'yotzes ha'gzeilah atzmi b'tachas yodei nifta. So as long as the gzeilah atzmi was tachas yodei, even though he didn't really give it away, he used it. Whereas he actually used the gzeilah for what he needed. Aval b'shnosen matone, part of b'chev. He knows he wanted to give a present, or he had to pay it for his chev, so he actually ended up getting rid of the gzeilah. Using the gzeilah. He didn't get rid of the gzeilah, he used the gzeilah. But nevertheless, he was nifta from this inyan that he's supposed to get paid back the gzeilah, get rid of the gzeilah b'tachas yodei. It has to be also in a way that he should be media them and tell them that zeg gezel abed knows the reason I'm giving you something which really I stole from my father. Knows this din, there's two dinim over here. This is one din is that he shouldn't remain with it. He shouldn't remain with the gezel, and also when he doesn't remain with the gezel, it should be in a way that the person that's getting the gezel should realize he's giving away something which zeg gezel abed. As far as the Oshim is concerned, I really don't know. L'chur it's pashut that in a case where he was gezel somebody and that person has Yarshim and he paid up the Yarshim, so pashtus he brings an Oshim, he paid up the Yarshim. In the case where he's the Yerush and he has brothers which are also Yarshim and he pays up to the brothers the part that he owes them, so l'chur he also would bring an Oshim because Lepel he paid up their portion, the portion that he's Yarshiming. He doesn't pay, but Lepel he paid up their portion which they're entitled to. So even though the Maisik Gzeilah was really on more, but Lepel, he's paying up the Maisik Gzeilah which he owes to them. I'm not really sure. In the case where Lepel, there's no Yarshim, there's no other Yarshim, so Mamela, he's not really paying anybody. He's not really paying up. He's just getting rid of the Gzeilah, which the din he has to get rid of the Gzeilah. It shouldn't be by him. But L'chur, it's not shaykhah that he should bring a carbon Oshim. Not really sure. The Ram doesn't speak about it over here. Maybe somewhere else he speaks about it. Halacha Dalet. V'chein hagoizel es hager v'nishbalei. A person gazeled from a ger and v'nishbalei. And again, he owed the ger money. The ger monned by him the money, and he said that he denied owing him the money, and he swore that he doesn't owe him the money. That's the case. When it says hagoizel es hager, it doesn't mean he gazeled the ger. It means he was gazeled from the ger by denying that he owes him the money. That's what the goizel and hager means over here. And v'nishbalei, and he swore that he doesn't owe him the money. And now v'chazer v'hidlei, he's being moided that he did owe him the money. And so Lepel at this point in time he owes the ger a keren v'chemesh. Now if he owes the ger a keren v'chemesh and the ger dies, at this point in time that's what we're going to learn b'hamshach. That's what we're going to learn b'hamshach, that since he can't pay the keren v'chemesh to the ger, so he has to bring it to the keren, which is basically a mishmar. But over here it was already zakov olav b'milva. In other words, he owed him the money. He was already moida. But it was also Zakav ala b'milva knows he made up Kilo that the ger said, all right, you owe me the money. I'm not. You have to know exactly what Zakav ala b'milva is, but the word is it was established that he owes him the money, and the ger said that they made up a certain time that you're going to pay me this and this money at a certain time. So it's Kilo the pshat is that the ger, since he was Zakav ala b'milva, it's Kilo the ger received the money and he lent him back the money. That's what Zakav ala b'milva l'chur accomplishes. In other words, I owe you the money. The person owes the ger the money, but like this, originally he owed the ger the money because he owed the keren v'chemesh. But when it was zakal of the milva, the pshat is kilu, the keren v'chemesh was kilu already paid to the ger. It wasn't actually paid, but it was kilu was paid to the ger, and now the ger lent him back this money. That's the havan of the zakal of the milva. So now there's no longer this din of the keren v'chemesh, the original keren v'chemesh. It's kilu, the original keren v'chemesh was paid. And v'achar kach mes hager, and then the ger was died. Is afal pi shezacha b'gzeilah, even though Lepel he keeps the gzeilah because since it was zakal olav b'milva, so mele there's no one he really has to return it to anymore. But nevertheless, chayiv leitziyam b'tachas yodi. Just like we learned before that when a person's a yerush, really he doesn't have to pay it anymore. But nevertheless, he shouldn't remain with the gzeilah. So al derozeh in a situation with a ger again, the person was he was kafir to the ger, and then he was nishba, and then he was hoida. and then it was Zakav Olav B'Milva. So it's Kilu, the Ger got already paid. So Memela, so at this point in time, he doesn't owe anybody the money because it was Zakav Olav B'Milva. He's not going to have to give it to the Kehanim. But on the other end, he shouldn't remain with the original Gzeilah, which was Be'en. Now, Bamedvar Mamurim Shahidim in time. If there was a middle, there was a Hidah. In other words, he was Kafar, and he was Nishba, and he was Meida. Avum Gazal Sager Shein Liyorshim, and V'Nishbalei, Umes Hager, and the Ger died without being Meida, so he was never Meida to the Ger. So then the din is Hariza Chayiv L'Shalom HaKeren V'Choymish L'Keim Shleisi HaMishmar. So that's the whole new din. That's the din of Gzeilah Ger. Gzeilah Ger means he was Kafar and Nishba to the Ger. And Lepel, he wasn't Meida to the Ger. And now, after the Ger dies, he's being Meida. Now, the question is, who does he owe the money to? So he can't give it to the Yarshim because there aren't any Yarshim. So over here, this Chidush that the Torah tells us that he has to give it to the Kenim, Shreis HaMishmar. Nochamal, Avalum Gazal Sager Shein Liyorshim, V'Nishbalei Umes Hager. So the din is Harei Zachayiv L'Shalom HaKeren B'Choymish L'Kenim Shreis HaMishmar. Maybe Hashameh, and then he brings his Hashameh. Clear, the Ram says over here, maybe Hashameh, and V'Charkach is Chapoleh, and then he'll have the Kapara. Now the Maisa is, the Ravid points out, there's like L'chura discrepancy between Daled and Hay. To say in Daled, the Rambam was speaking about that it was Haidoleh, and it was also Zakav B'Milva, and at that point in time, there's no Chiyuv to do anything. Masha'inkin, what would be if Haidoleh and not Zakav B'Milva? So L'chura, the Pashtus, it comes out, if it was not Haida, if it was Haida and it wasn't Zakalav Milva, so then he still has the Chiyuv to bring it to the Yarshim. In other words, when do we say that it's Ki'ilu, he paid up the Ger already because it was Zakalav Milva, but it was just Haidaloi, so Memele, he never really paid the Ger. He owed the Ger a Karen V'Chemish, but he never paid him. Now the Ger died, so the din is he has to bring it to the Karen. L'chura, that's what would be Meduyik from Dalit. Mashenkin and Hay, we say no. That in Hay he says that im Gazal Saker and it knows if it was not Hoida, knows in Hay it says clearly that Lepel, if he was Kafar and he was a Nishba to the Ger and there was no Hoida, so that's when the din of Gzeilah Ger applies, that has to bring it to the Ken. In Dalit it says that he was Gazal Sager and he was Nishba and he was Hoida and Zakalol V'Milva, so then this din doesn't apply. Now, what will be in a case where he was Moida, but he wasn't Zakalov B'Milva? So if you Medayik, Halacha Dalit, it seems like in such a case, that's when the din of Gzeilah Ger does apply. And if you look in Halacha Hey, it seems like not. The whole din of Gzeilah Ger, where he has to give it to the Anshe HaMishmar, is only when it was not Hoida. So that's the Ravid is asking on the Rambam. Halacha Vav, M'pi Hashmuel Lamdu, Shezeh Shenema B'Teira, V'm'ein Le'ish Geil, and the pasuk continues, V'm'ein Le'ish Geil, L'Hashim Ha'osham Elov. Ha'osham Hamushiv Lakein, that should be to Lashem Yeh. So over there it says V'm'ein Le'ish Geil L'Hashiv Ha'osham Elov Ha'osham Hamushiv Lakein is over there is Beger Shemes Ve'ein Li'Yarshim HaKasam Davar. That's talking about the parsha of a Ger Shemes Ve'ein Li'Yarshim. That's this din we're learning over here. That if you have a Ger that Lepel you were Nishbal HaSheker, you were Kafar and Nishbal HaSheker, and now you're being Moider. That you owe him the money, that you owe him the money, and Lepel, you should owe the Karen and the Chaimish, and he's no longer here because he has no Goyel, there's no Yerish. So then there's this special din that you have to bring it to the Karen. Now Lepel, since the Torah calls the Karen, the Beger Shemez Ben Liyoshim HaKosem Medaber, V'Oshim Zeh Ha'amur Kan, Hu Gzeilah V'Aveidah. So the word Oshim, when it says L'Hoshim Ha'oshim Elov, Ha'oshim Hamushiv Lakein, so this is talking about the Keren. So that's M'pi Hashmuel Lamdu. Let's read it again. M'pi Hashmuel Lamdu. Shezeh Shenema B'Teira V'me'ein Lo Ish Geil. It's talking about Beger Shemes V'ein Lo Yorshim HaKosem Medaber. That's the Ger Shemes V'ein Lo Yorshim, which the Rambam spoke about in Halacha Dalet and Hay. And then V'Oshim Zeh Ha'amur Kan, when it says L'Hoshiv Ha'oshim Elov, Ha'oshim Hamushiv Lakein, the word Oshim over here means Gzeilah V'Aveidah. The Fichach, since the Torah writes the word about the Gzeilah and the Meh, he calls it Osham. The Fichach Hamagzer Gezel Hager Balayla. Person owes the Gezel Hager. He knows there was a Gezel Hager, and Mela the Ger is no longer here, so he has to go and bring it Ha'osham Lahoshiv Ha'osham Elav Ha'osham Hamushiv Lakein. So he has to bring this Karen to the Kain. So the din is, since the Torah calls this Karen Osham, So mainly we learn now that just like a carbon can't be brought at night, you can't make the piroin of this money, of the Gzeilah V'Aveidah that you're bringing to the Kanim also at night. Lefichach hamachzil Gzeilah V'Aveidah balayla. If you return the Gzeilah V'Aveidah balayla leyotza. Why? Shari Osham Kariyakasa. The Torah is referring to this Karen with the word Osham, Veimakrivim balayla. That's the number one. And also, Veinakoinim Chilkin Gzeilah V'Aveidah Keneged Gzeilah V'Aveidah. If there were two people that brought Gzeilah V'Aveidah, so just like the din is that if there's two karbanis, you don't say one kohen should take one carbon, and the other kohen the basar of one carbon, and the other kohen takes the basar of the other carbon, but rather each carbon you divide the basar amongst all the kohenim. So al derech is over here. If you have Gzeilah V'Aveidah from one Gzeilah V'Aveidah, and then you have Gzeilah V'Aveidah from another Gzeilah V'Aveidah, you don't say, listen, let's divide it and take part of this money. The other will take the other money. And he says, no. Each Gzeilah V'Aveidah, since it's a din Osham, has a din like a carbon, so all the kohenim divide each Gzeilah V'Aveidah, each of the Gzeilah V'Aveidah. Beina kohenim chilkin Gzeilah V'Aveidah keneged Gzeilah V'Aveidah, kederach shein chilkin b'sar Osham neged b'sar Osham ach. Halacha zayin. Kol Gzeilah V'Aveidah she'ein b'sheva pruta l'chol kein v'kein me'anshi ha'mishmar. So when the person comes and he has to bring back the Karen and the Chaimish to the Anshi HaMishmar, he's the Karen and the Chaimish that he was kafar. He was kafar v'nishba l'sheker and he added a Chaimish. So if there's no shava pruta l'chol kein v'kein me'anshi ha'mishmar l'yotza hamachzi yidei hashava. So he wasn't yotzi yidei hashava, even though he paid all the money that he originally owed the ger plus a Chaimish. But l'peil, if there's no shava pruta to each of the kenim, leyotza mazi de hashava shnemer hamushav lashem lakein. So we learn now ashetia hashava lechol kein. There has to be hashava lechol kein. Now v'lo menamer b'Gzeilah V'Aveidah ish. It says over there v'im ein leish geil, if ein leish geil. So we learn out a zaytik gezach that knows we're talking about a ger, and we're saying that ein leish geil means he has no children. So when do we have to declare if he has children or he doesn't have children? If he's an ish, if he's a gadol, so then you could declare if he has children or he doesn't have children. Masha'inkin, if he's a cotton, so a cotton is any meled. Meled, you don't have to declare. He for sure doesn't have children. V'lo menamer b'Gzeilah V'Aveidah ish, so ish at tzorich lachker u'chazer olav yesh lo yorshim ein lo yorshim. Avol hoya a ger cotton, if he was a ger cotton, he at tzorich lechazer olav elacheskosish ein lo yorshim. So the pastors he has no yorshim. And Memela, there's no kshash that you don't have to look for it. So it's a zaytik azach. We're learning over here. There's a din of Gzeilah V'Aveidah, and the Gzeilah V'Aveidah of ger she'ein liyorshim. So the din is you have to bring the money to the canon. But we're also learning that if it's a ger, which is an ish, so you have to be mevarer if he has a yorshim. Masha'inkin, if he's not an ish, he's a cotton. So then you don't have to be mevarer that he has no yorshim. So basically, we're seeing over here also that there's bia hichatimtza of a ger cotton. Of a ger cotton that has money, and someone owes him money, and lepel he denied the money to the ger cotton. That's what's happening here. He denied the money to the ger cotton, and the din is also that lepel, if he was nishba l'sheker, so then he has to bring a keren b'cheimish, and if the cotton dies, and lepel he can't give him any of the money, and he doesn't have a yerish, so then he has to bring the money to the keren. So the same thing applies to a ger cotton. Just about a ger godly, you have to look to find out if he has yorshim there. Mainly is goyel. Masha'inkin, a ger cotton obviously doesn't have a goyel. So there's a taste in Baba Kama that really declares how does a cotton have money? How does a ger cotton have money? It's like a dion. How does the cotton have a kinyan over there? Tesa says that Tesa says one side that when das acheres makna knows if a cotton doesn't really have a kinyan menatera, so how does a cotton have a kinyan? L'chura al derech haposhet, even though we're speaking about a ger, but l'chura the same din would be a ben ger if you'd have a mashal a ger. And that ger had one child. He had a child. He had one child, and that child is this ger cotton. This ger cotton is one child. So his father had money. He was a gadol, and now this ger cotton yashin his father. But lepel, this ger cotton doesn't have any children. He doesn't have any children. He doesn't have a father. His father died, so he has no craving. So you can have the same exact case. L'chura, I'm saying to answer Tesis' kasha. How does the ger cotton have children, have money? L'chura, the ger cotton doesn't have to be an original ger. L'chura, if he's a ben hager, he also has the din of a ger. L'chura, that's al derech hapashut. Halacha ches hakohen b'Gzeilah V'Aveidah ki mekabli matanisem. We learn now from the pasuk that they have a din of mekabli matanis lefichach. Hagoizel chometz min hager she'ein lo yorshim, and v'over olav ha'pesach, and now he denied it to the ger. Memele he owes the ger the keren v'cheimish. He denied it to the ger, and lepel he owes the ger the keren v'cheimish because he's being moida. He's being moida lamazon now that he lied to the ger and he swore falsely to the ger. So memele he owes the keren v'cheimish. Now the keren is still bad. The original keren is still bad. He stole, let's say, something chametz, and it was over all of Pesach. So lefichach hagoizel chametz menager she'en lo yorshim and va'over all of Pesach. So the din is chayav litin lakenim is dom of kishas gzeilah. He can't be yoitza by giving back to the kenim the actual chametz of Pesach. In other words, if he would have returned it to the ger himself, so the ger himself, since he's a gazlan from the ger, so memela the din is a gazlan could say arei shel chol fanach. If a person steals chametz and then it was over all of a Pesach, so the gazlan is v'heishes gzeilah. So since it's be'an and it's only has iksheni nicker, so therefore you could say harei shel chol fanacha. Masha'enken, when he's giving it to the canim, the ger is no longer here. So over here he can't say harei shel chol fanacha. He has to give him something which has a value. Now we learn out from the fact that the Torah says that it should be yitin. That it's a lahashiv ha'ashim olav ha'ashim hamushav lakein. It should be lakein. You should give it to the kain. So we learn out that it has to be kedei nesina. Hakein lachamal hakein and begezl hager kemekal matan saying lefichach hagezel chametz min hager she'en lo yorshim and va'ova olav ha'pesach. So if the ger would be alive, you'd be able to give him back the actual chametz. But since the ger is no longer alive, and now you have to give it to the kanim, so the din is chayav litin lekanim is dom of kishas hagzeilah. She'im yitneu lehamachshav ein matana sheri yosef bano. Ilo haya ger kayam. If the ger would have been here, he would have said like we learned in Hilchos Gzeilah that the din is that you can say by chametz aval of Pesach. But when you're giving it to the kanim over there, you have to give him the value of this chametz as it was when he stole it, when he actually stole it. Now, actually stole it over here means when he actually denied it. Whereas the stealing over here is talking about the Maisa Gzeilah of the denial, not the original Gzeilah. Over here we're talking about the Maisa Gzeilah of the denial. Halacha tes. Koyin shegazel ger she'elu yarshim and v'nishbalei. And now mesager. So l'chura you have to give the money to the kanim. So he says he's a koyin, so let him keep that money. So the din is no lei zacha zeh b'gzeilah shetachas yodi. He has a chiyuv to give it to the kanim shebeisi hamishmer. He can't keep that money that he has to give to the kanim shebeisi hamishmer, even though he's a kain. Eliyetzi mitachas yodi l'chol echav hakenim b'nei hamishmeres. The Echav HaKenim, which are the Bnei HaMishmeres, he has to give them this Gzeilah. Halacha Yud. Hagoizel Sager, V'nishbalei U'mesager. Now over here, there's this special din that you have to go ahead and bring the money to the Mishmar. Now, Be'emes, if there wouldn't have been this Indian that he swore falsely, a person owes a ger money and the ger dies, so obviously he doesn't owe him the money anymore. Lepel, since he was zeich in the money, whereas he owes the ger has no yarsh. If the ger has no yarshim, so mainly he doesn't owe anyone the money. Over here, there's a special din that since he was nishbal hasheker, so the Torah says that the money that he would have normally given the ger, he should give now to the mishmar. So he has to give the keren the chemish to the mishmar. Now, hagezel sager v'nishbal and behem shechol is there. He's also going to bring a korban nashim. In other words, he has to bring the keren and the chaimish to the mishmar, and behem shechol is there. He's going to bring a korban asham. So hagezel sager v'nishbalei umes hager, and now v'hifresh ashame, he was mafresh his asham to bring as an asham gzeilas, and also gzeilase and the amount of money that he has to give to the mishmar, which he would have really had to give to the kain. Lahalesin lekain, he was mafresh the side the asham and side the gzeilah lahalesin lekain, and lepeil umes hagazim kedim kapara. Before he actually had a chance to go ahead and bring this carbon and to bring it to the kainim, he was mes hagazim. So now the bnei hagazim have this asham, which he was supposed to, which the gazlan was supposed to bring, and also the money which he was supposed to bring to the mishmar. So the din is hari bnei hagazlan yershim is kesef hagzeilah. This kesef hagzeilah the gazlan has to bring. The gazlan had to bring the kesef hagzeilah, and then he would have to bring an asham. But now that the gazlan is no longer here, so there's no one that's really mechuyev to go ahead and bring this kesef hagzeilah. This kesef hagzeilah, which he designated to bring to the kain, was the vaila his. So if he would go ahead and bring it, he would bring it to the mishmar, he would give it to the mishmar, it would become theirs, and then he would bring his asham. But over here, since Lepel, he's no longer alive. So Memela, so there's not going to be a Karban Nashim anyways. But I'll call upon him. There's no one that's really mechuyev to give this money to the mishmar. He was mechuyev to bring the money to the mishmar and then bring a carbon, but now he's not here. So his Yarshim yashin him. So the Yarshim of the Gazlan yashin him. So Rebnei Gazlan yashin zakes v'Gzeilah. Gzeilah Atzma, or if the Gzeilah Atzma is ben, because the Gzeilah Atzma belonged to the ger and lepel. So there's no ger to return it to. So Memela, so the Bnei Yarshim yashin it from the ger. The mice is the Bnei, the Gazlan himself was going to bring it to the Bnei Mishmar, but now the Gazlan no longer alive. V'Osham, what about the Osham? Is Yirat Sheipol Beimum K'misha B'Yarnu B'Mkemi. That an Osham Shemesu Balel is Yirat Sheipol Beimum and Yiplu Dom of Linadova to Kayit Samizberch. So B'Kitzer, the din is that a kohen, a person that there's a musik Gezel Ager. So the din is he has to bring the Karen and the Chaimish to the Bnei Mishmar, and he brings an Osham. Now, if you have a person that was he was already mafresh the Keren and the Chaimish to bring to the Bnei Mishmar, and he was mafresh the Osham, but Lepel, he died before he actually brought this money, so this money is his money. It's his money, so it belongs to the Bnei Gazlan. The Bnei Gazlan have no chiyuv to bring it to the Bnei Mishmar, and the Osham, since it's a carbon, which is Osham Shemesu Baleh, so the din is Yirat, she is Taiv, and the Yipul Yidamel, to Tfakay Samizbech. Halacha Yudalef. Nosan Hagazlan is a kesev l'anshi mishmar. He already gave the money to the Anshe Mishmar. And the purpose and the plan was that he's going to give the money to the Anshe Mishmar and then he's going to bring a carbon. But Lepel, the mes kedem kapara, he never really, before the kapara, he's no longer alive. So the din is now the taining, the Yarshim of the Gazlan saying, the only reason why he gave the money to the Anshe Mishmar is in order to be able to bring a kapara. But Lepel, since he's not bringing a kapara anyways, so let's take the money back. Umes kedem kapara, so there is no ein Yershi Agazlan yechoylin lohitzim yadakenim. They can't take it out of Miyad HaKenim. Even though the real purpose of giving it to the Kenim was in order for him to be able to have a kapara. But nevertheless, Lepel, once the Kenim have the money, it remains by them. So we learn out that once it was given to the Kenim, is leiyah remains by the Kenim. Afilo haya agazn cotton, sheim matonosi matona, is nevertheless ein yorshav mitziyam Miyad HaKenim. So Lepel, if the person that was actually bringing the Gzeilah Ger, the person that was actually bringing the Gzeilah Ger. So in other words, the Gazlan was a cotton, and he was mafresh. The Karen that he swore falsely. That's the Rambam saying that it could be a cotton that swore falsely, and in Mele he's bringing now to a Ger, and now he's bringing the Karen, the Chaimish, and he's going to bring an Osham as well. So now Lepel, and then the cotton died, so he's not going to be able to bring an Osham. Afilo Yagazan cotton she'em matanosi matona is nevertheless ein yorshav mitziyam Miyad HaKenim. Once it was given to the Kenim, even through a cotton, so it remains by the Kenim. Halacha Yud Beis. Now the din is, you have to bring the money. To who do you bring the money? You bring the money to, you bring the money and you give it to the Anshi HaMishmar of that Mishmar, and you bring also a carbon. So the pashtus, the money is given to the Anshi HaMishmar, and the carbon is given to the Anshi HaMishmar. Now what happens if you gave the Osham to one Mishmar, you gave the Osham to one Mishmar, and you gave the money to a different Mishmar? You gave the Osham to the Mishmar, let's say, that's right now the Mishmar, and you went ahead and you gave the money to a different Mishmar. So you say the money is for this Mishmar and the carbon is for this Mishmar. So the din is nosen sakesev la'achas min ha-mishmaris, v'esa Osham l'mishmere zushi Shabbata. There's the Mishmar of this Shabbos, you gave them the Osham. You say, yeah, we have to bring a carbon. But who am I paying the money to? I'm going to pay the money to a different Mishmar. So the din is not like that, because Lepel right now, since this is the Anshe HaMishmar, and this is the ones that are going to bring the carbon, says Yavzer HaKesev Eitz LaOsham LaAnshe HaMishmar HaKvua. So the Mishmar HaKvua, which got the Osham, and they are supposed to be makriv the Osham once the Kesev is paid, so the Kesev has to be paid to them. The Kesev should be paid to them, and then they bring the Mishmar. Shamishmar Shalokha Kesev Lei Shabbata is Lei Zochsa. They weren't Zeicha B'chal. They weren't entitled to the money. The money is entitled to the people of that Mishmar. So you take the money out of their hands. That's this. So b'kitzur ha'maisa, you give the money to the mishmar, which is this week's mishmar. You can't go ahead and say, well, in this other mishmar, I have someone that I know, and I want to give them the money. I'll give this mishmar my carbon, But on the other end, I'll give the other mishmer the money. So you say, no, the money has to be given to the mishmer of this week, which they are going to be the ones that are going to be makriv the korban. Now, ein makriven es ha'osham, ad sheyachzer ha'keren l'maylam. Elekenim am hoye Gzeilah V'Aveidah she'en li'yoshim, until the Gzeilah is returned to the Bailam, only then could be makriv the osham. You can't bring the osham before the money is returned to where they have to be returned. Or lekenim im hoye Gzeilah V'Aveidah she'en li'yoshim. Now, nosen is ha'keren v'hikriv ha'shamei. He gave the keren, but he didn't give the chemish. Is this kapurlev ein a chemish ma'akav ha'kapara, and the chayiv litn is a chemish acher kapara. So here the Ram is saying you can't bring the carbon until you bring the keren. Really, you're supposed to give the keren the chemish. But if you gave the keren without the chemish and then you brought the kapara, so the kapara you were yotzei the kapara. But then you still have a chiyuv to bring the chemish. Halacha Yud Dalet ho'avodim v'ashtaros v'karkois ein bem tesus chemish. Now this din that we're learning, that when a person swears falsely, someone's money from you something and you swear falsely, now you admit that you swore falsely, so you have to pay back the keren plus a chemish. That doesn't apply to avodim, shtaris, and karkois. That doesn't apply to avodim, shtaris, and karkois. Shenamar, it says the pasuk, when this parsha, when it speaks about paying the keren v'chemish because he swore falsely, it says v'chichish b'amisi b'pikodin, and the pasuk reckons these other things. Kol ha'amar binyan, everything that's mentioned in that pasuk is metaltalin hu v'gufen moment. The things that the Torah is mentioning over there is something which is movable and gufen moment. So yotzu karkois, which is not movable, and also avodim are also excluded because they're hukshul karkois. They're compared to karka, and also v'yotzu shtaris she'en gufen moment. So therefore, the parsha of keren v'chemish that you have to pay when you swore falsely in denial of money that you owe only applies to metaltalin, the gufen moment. It doesn't apply to karka, it doesn't apply to avodim, which huksul karkois, and it doesn't apply to shtaris. Now the din of Gzeilah V'Aveidah is an extension of that din. Gzeilah V'Aveidah is an extension of that din. So normally when you swear falsely, you have to pay the person that you swore falsely to, the keren v'chemish. If he's not longer around, you have to pay his yarshim. A Gzeilah V'Aveidah where there's no yarshim, so mele there's a din, you have to bring it to the mishmer. But b'medvar mamurim, and things that normally a regular person would have to pay to the original owner or to the yarshim. Mashenkin, since we're saying karka and avodim ashtaris are excluded from this din of keren v'chemish and also osham, so al derazeh by Gzeilah V'Aveidah also doesn't apply. V'chein im hoyu Gzeilah V'Aveidah she'en lo yarshim is einam chezon lekenim. So it's not chezon lekenim. And those this din that you have to give the keren and the chemish to the kenim, that's only when we're dealing with something that's gufen mammon and it's metalton the gufen mammon. That's din number one. Then the Rambam continues v'chein hakarka eina niknas leilam legazlan. The whole musig of a gazlan being koine something and then selling something, there's a musig of yush and then shin rishus. That's all connected because the gazlan had a certain ma'aser kinyan on it, and through yush and shin rishus it becomes the other person's. That doesn't apply to karka. V'chein hakarka eina niknas leilam legazlan. El b'rishus ba'aleh oimedis. It always remains b'rishus ba'aleh. V'afilu nimkra le'elev zachar zeh, and v'nisyashu ha'bailam is always harezu chizeres le'nigzal. It goes back to the nigzal and b'lei dom. In other words, normally when you sell something to someone and lepel, it goes back to the nigzal, because let's say it was shlei b'yush, so the din is there was no year, so he takes it back. So then the din is he has to pay for it, because sof kol sof it was a davar hanigzal. It was a davar hanigzal and it was sold. So even though the buyer wasn't koyin it, because lepel it was without yush, but on the other end the nigzal has to pay for it. But medvar mamurim, when we're talking about metaltalin, when someone steals something from someone and he sells it to someone and there was no yush, so now when the nigzal could take it back, but he has to pay for it, like we learned. He has to pay for it. Masha'inkin, when someone steals from someone karka and he goes ahead and sells it, so then the nigzal, when once it's nizgala that it really belongs to the original owner, so the nigzal is not taking it back. In the case of the Gzeilah Pshat, the gazlan had it, and now the buyer from the gazlan has it. Now the nigzal is taking it back. Masha'inkin, by karka, it's not pshat he had it and he's taking it back. He didn't have it. He never had it. It belonged to the original nigzal, and it was always belonged to him. It's just that people were mistaking and thinking that it's theirs. but it's not really that he had it, so it's not really the pshat the nigzal is taking it back. It was never biyad anybody other than the nigzal. So Memele, he takes it back, b'lei dam. Whoever loses the... So normally you say, because since you lost your item, so the nigzal has to give you back the money. It's a takonis hashuk. But over here, since we're saying by karka, you don't get money back from the nigzal, so who do you get money back? You go back to your seller. So you go back to your seller, and your seller goes back to his seller, until ultimately you go back to the gazlan. Anyone that loses the item is chezer al zeh shemachale. He goes back to the person that sold it to him. Now that buyer goes back to the one that sold it to him until the one that actually bought it from the gazlan goes back to the gazlan, and he takes from him the money that he paid the gazlan.